1.
Children's daycare. You will hear a man and a woman talking about daycare for their children. Before you listen again, you have 30 seconds to read questions 1 to 5.
Hi, Sanjeet. How are you?
Pretty well, Angela. Tom won't be here for another 10 minutes. Shall we have coffee while we're waiting?
Why not? How's your family?
Not too bad, except my son Arav had a cold last week and then my wife Navreet caught it.
Oh, dear. My daughter Zoe had a temperature this morning, and I wasn't sure whether to send her to daycare. But my husband's away in Toronto, and I can't take any more time off myself.
I guess kids get all kinds of things at daycare.
I don't know. They also build up resistance there. By the way, I'm sending out invitations for Zoe's birthday party. How do you spell Arav?
AARAV.
Thanks. I've never heard the name before. What does it mean?
Peaceful or wise? It's popular in India because the film stars Twinkle Khanna and Akshay Kumar called their son Arav. What does Zoe mean?
It's the Greek form of Eve, which was my mother's name. It means life.
Nice. Navreet and I have put Arav's name down at a daycare center in East Lindsey, but we've heard a few odd things about it, so we're looking elsewhere. What's Zoe's daycare like?
Pretty good. My son went there for 2 years, and he survived.
If you don't mind my asking, what does it cost?
It varies. If you provide things yourself, like diapers and snacks, it's reasonable, around $30 a day. But if the center provides everything, it starts to add up and can go as high as $50.
I see.
Also, there are quite a few hidden costs.
Such as?
Well, the parents are kind of competitive. If a child has a birthday, Mom or Dad is expected to bring a snack for the whole room. The daycare is divided into rooms by age. Right now, Zoe's in Penguins. Sometimes I think parents spend a lot of time and money on those birthday snacks.
Once Navreet's back at work, she may well be too busy.
Absolutely. Also, if you set a pickup time but get there 15 minutes late, the center fines you $5 and $5 more for every quarter hour thereafter.
That's a bit steep, especially if you were just caught in traffic.
Before you listen to the rest of the conversation, you have 30 seconds to read questions 6 to 10.
So, tell me about the center in East Lindsey.
At first I was impressed. It's spotless throughout, and the staff seems caring and responsible. I like the fact there's a decent amount of space, especially outdoors. However, I'm worried that the children aren't explicitly taught anything. All they do is play. Sure, Arav's only 1, but in an 8-hour day, there's a lot he can learn.
At Zoe's daycare, there is some structure to the week and some tuition. In Penguins, Monday is alphabet day, and Wednesday is numbers. In Tigers, Monday's computer day, and Wednesday's music.
Computer day?
Yeah. Parents have to provide tablets for their children when they turn 2. Another of the hidden costs I was telling you about.
Right.
But there's one good thing at Zoe's daycare. You're not charged if your child's off sick for a day. And as long as you give notice, you can take your child out for holidays, which, again, you don't pay for. Many centers will only allow a 1-month fee-free break in a year.
What's the hygiene like?
Good enough. The kids do get things in their hair, which is a bit embarrassing. But supermarkets stock shampoo, and parents are contacted as soon as there's an outbreak.
Would you say the center kept parents well informed?
Yes, I would. There you go. A reminder about Zoe's birthday. Her snack can't contain peanuts because a boy in penguins has an allergy.
That is the end of part 1.
You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Now turns to part 2.
Part 2. A very small house. You will hear a woman being interviewed on the radio about living in a very small house. Before you listen, you have 30 seconds to read questions 11 to 15.
Welcome to today's show, coming to you from the home of Charlotte Williams. Good morning, Charlotte.
Morning, Simon.
Thanks for letting us into your home, which I believe has been inundated with guests recently.
Yes, I held my birthday party here.
Surely that was a squeeze, given your whole house is 8 square meters, about the size of my kitchen.
The party was in the garden.
I understand there's been an upsurge in interest in the tiny house movement.
That's right. Even Oprah has interviewed some of its devotees. We're no longer the weirdos at the end of the street.
But you were for some time, weren't you?
Yes, I was. I'm sorry to say I've had unpleasant text messages, rubbish strewn across my lawn, and rats put into my water tanks.
Goodness.
But you know, when I was a kid, people used to smoke in doctors' waiting rooms and on airplanes. Once on a flight to LA, I practically choked. My mother said crossly, "Settle down, it's only smoke." Now, of course, no one smokes on airplanes, and my mother is the first person to tell anyone off who lights up in a surgery.
So your mother's one of your fans?
I wouldn't say that exactly. Anyway, she lives in France. In my opinion, in the developed world, we all consume too much. I mean, in 1945, the average house in this city for a 5 to 7 person family was 111 square meters. 2 generations later, it's twice that size, while the family has only 3.5 to 4 people.
I note you say in the developed world. Perhaps an immigrant might still think you're weird. After all, isn't the American dream to think big?
Yes, one criticism leveled at me is that my lifestyle is anti-American. It's true that while working in Mozambique and Vietnam, I was inspired by my neighbors who used few resources.
Before you listen to the rest of the conversation, you have 30 seconds to read questions 16 to 20.
In Mozambique, people use far less water and electricity than here. That's when I started to live without a fridge or a shower, like the locals. I washed in a basin of water, which I still do.
I don't think I could live without a shower.
In Vietnam, many of my neighbors didn't have a kitchen, but cooked and ate outside. This meant there was life in the streets. Here, my kitchen consists of 2 elements and that basin. And as you know, my party was outside. Also, in my part of Ho Chi Minh City, children generally slept in 1 bedroom. Indeed, children do share more when they're in small spaces, and they're less likely to acquire all the junky toys that fill up many American homes.
But you live alone, Charlotte, and the climate here is rather different.
Sure, my son's grown up and my partner lives in Chicago, although he visits often. The climate is cold here, but my heating bill is low because this is a small space. I do still need quilts and winter clothes, which I store under my bed. However, I own 2 coats, while my sister's got 10.
If you don't mind my saying so, Charlotte, isn't 8 square meters rather cramped? Haven't you had to give up all kinds of things?
Firstly, I have a great view of trees from my bed, so I feel part of nature, of the great expanse of nature. When I lived in a larger house, all I could see were other large houses. Honestly, I haven't given up anything. Every single item I now own has to be functional and beautiful. I don't keep anything out of guilt because it was a present or I paid a lot for it. I had 4,000 possessions before moving here. Now, I've got 400.
What other savings have you made?
I didn't pay much for this property, so I'm mortgage-free, which means I can work part-time. Without a doubt, the greatest saving I've made is of time. I clean my house for 1 hour a week. In the past, I was a slave to chores and maintenance. Most people think I live in a tiny house out of poverty or fanaticism, when really it's through choice. I'm just getting on with life.
That is the end of part 2.
You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Now turns to part 3. Part 3. Now turns to part 3.
You will hear 2 students discussing an assignment they are doing on business plans. Before you listen, you have 30 seconds to read questions 21 to 26.
I don't know, Luca. 800 words don't seem like many to me.
Except I've only written 450.
Why don't you talk through what you've got? And I can suggest where you might add some in?
I can show you my essay, if you like, on my computer.
Telling me about it may be better. It will help you clarify what you have, and you'll probably notice what's missing as you speak. So what is a business plan?
Something that projects ahead for at least 3 years.
Something?
Well, in essence, it's,
An analysis of the current situation a business finds itself in, and a projection of its growth.
Right.
And what else?
Basically, I suppose...
What about the standards a business plan creates?
Oh, yeah. The plan creates standards, and it discusses viability.
Indeed. Who does it provide a tool for?
Investors. I mean, potential investors. Let me turn on my computer to type that in. It discusses viability and provides a sales tool for potential investors.
Good. Now, what about the 5 steps involved in creating the plan?
5? I wrote down 3 in the lecture. 1. Carry out a situational analysis. 2. Understand the operating environment. And 3. Define business objectives. Were there any others?
I'm sure there were 5, but I've forgotten them myself now.
Oh, I remember. Something about formulating strategies.
Yes, formulate strategies to follow.
And 5?
Design controls to measure success, though I've no idea what those controls might be.
Me neither. I don't have any real-world experience for this course. I'm doing it because my cousin told me it was easy.
Anyway, the last thing to note in the essay that there's not just one business plan. A company usually composes separate plans for all sections of the master plan. That means another marketing plan, another production plan, etc.
I had no idea there was so much planning. How do businesses have any time to actually work?
Before you listen to the rest of the conversation, you have 30 seconds to read questions 27 to 30.
Let's look at the short answers now. My friend who took this course last year said the final exam contained the short answers from this assignment and the next one.
Then I'd better learn them off by heart.
So without reading from your computer screen, what are the 5 functions a business can be divided into?
You mean MP3F?
Yes.
M for marketing, the 3 Ps for purchasing, production, and what's the last one?
Personnel.
Right, personnel. And F for finance.
Good. I see you've remembered that the business profile and appendices open and close the plan. But I think your definition of appendices is a bit vague.
What's wrong with end notes?
Certainly, appendices are found at the end of the plan, but the phrase supporting documents might describe them more clearly.
Okay, I'll write that down. Supporting documents.
The key here is that there is support for every section of the plan because an investor wants to see a strong case presented for your business, to know you are not just making assertions.
Right.
The first few components of your business profile look fine. Business name, location, ownership structure.
And business activity is easy enough to describe.
True. But I'm afraid your market entry strategy and future objectives look a little thin.
The thing is, Natasha, I don't understand what a market entry strategy is, and future objectives seem equally nebulous.
I know what you mean. I see you've mentioned legal requirements in the business profile.
Don't you remember, the lecturer said that in today's environment of tight regulation, without this section in the plan, the whole business could end up being an expensive failure?
Oh, help. I forgot about legal requirements in my profile. Thanks for reminding me. I'm sorry, Luca. I'll have to go. Let's meet again after the tutorial.
That is the end of part 3.
You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Now turns to part 4.
Part 4. Benefits of literature. You will hear a lecture on the benefits of reading literature. Before you listen, you have 45 seconds to read questions 31 to 40.
Last week, my 16-year-old neighbour asked me to look over her essay on the value of reading. I read the text and was impressed by her elegant prose. But there was one glaring omission. Most of her essay was about how we read or why we read. In my opinion, how or why is far less important than what we read. No one today would deny that reading improves cognitive intelligence. I bet the top 3 students here are also the 3 biggest readers. However, a growing number of experts attribute literary fiction to a reader's enhanced capacity for emotional as well as cognitive intelligence. But what are emotional intelligence and literary fiction? Actually, emotional intelligence is a phrase popularized by the media. Academics like me prefer the term theory of mind, or TOM. TOM is the ability to attribute mental states, beliefs, intentions, desires, pretense, and knowledge to oneself and others, and to understand that others have states different from one's own. Notable deficits in TOM occur in people with schizophrenia, attention deficit, and autism spectrum disorders, or with neurotoxicity due to drug or alcohol abuse. What is literary fiction? Well, it's writing considered as classic, winning widespread acclaim, translated into many languages, and enduring over time. Think Jane Austen, Anton Chekhov, or F. Scott Fitzgerald, and people like Ala Aswani, Paulo Coelho, or Alice Munro. The vast majority of books, however, are not literary. They're non-fiction or popular fiction. Non-fiction deals with facts and popular fiction with formulaic stories. True, in pop fiction, readers go on an emotional journey, often in exotic settings, but while events may be dramatic, the external and internal lives of characters are predictable. This means readers' expectations remain unchallenged. Their view of the world is intact. By contrast, literary fiction focuses on the psychological states of characters and on their complex interpersonal relationships. Some writers adopt a technique called stream of consciousness, in which they minutely describe what is occurring in a character's head. Others only allude to a character's state of mind. In the first instance, readers may be exposed to ways of perceiving the world quite different from their own. In the second, their need to interpret intentions or motivations expands their emotional problem-solving capacity. So, despite being set in the real, often humdrum world, literary works defy expectations by challenging prejudices and undermining stereotypes. 5 experiments by the New York academics David Kidd and Emanuele Castano have confirmed this. They invited hundreds of online participants to read extracts from non-fiction, popular fiction, or literary fiction, or not to read anything at all. On cognitive and emotional tests, Kidd and Castano demonstrated that readers of literary fiction performed better compared to readers of other genres, or those who did not read. It's conceivable that including literary fiction in the daily routine of prisons, as well as in schools and universities, would bear fruit. It is already known that those in the correctional system who receive credits towards liberal arts college degrees survive better on release. Medicating children with autism or ADHD has been fashionable, but having them read literature may improve their conditions. There are some lesser benefits to reading literary fiction. Firstly, it encourages discipline and connectedness. Discipline because the language or style may be complex, and a length of time is needed to finish it. Connectedness because readers identify strongly with great characters. Think about a generation of children who read the 7 Harry Potter books, devoting around 40 hours to them. An equivalent amount of time spent watching a TV series would not generate an equivalent emotional response. Secondly, neuroscientists in 2013 discovered enhanced neural activity in subjects who read fine literature daily. Those who read just before falling asleep were more likely to waken soothed and focused, unlike TV viewers. So why aren't schools, universities and prisons insisting on more literary fiction? Why aren't sales of Nobel Prize winners soaring? Some say life is too demanding. Common Sense Media, a San Francisco-based non-profit organization, produced a report called Why Aren't Teens Reading? It showed that currently 27% of 17-year-olds read for pleasure almost every day, whereas in 1984, 31% did. 30 years ago, 9% of 17-year-olds said they seldom or never read for pleasure. By 2014, those figures had tripled to 27%. Many respondents attribute this change to needing time for other life skills. But it is my argument that, as complexity increases, the young become more adept at dealing with it when they read literary fiction. So, did I suggest my neighbour redraft her essay? No. I gave her a copy of The Little Prince, a French classic from 1943, and asked her to pass it on to a friend when she'd finished.
That is the end of part 4.
You now have half a minute to check your answers.